One, two, three, four.
You are listening to SKYLIT, the SKYLIT Books podcast. SKYLIT Books is a general interest bookstore in the Los Feliz neighborhood in Los Angeles. You can shop with us from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. or visit us online 24/7 at skylitbooks.com. Follow along at SKYLIT Books Instagram and Twitter. You can subscribe to the podcast on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Thank you for listening, and now on to the episode.
Hello, my lovely and beautiful listeners, and welcome to SKYLIT. This is the SKYLIT Books podcast, and I'm your host, Lance Morgan. Today, I'm so excited to welcome Margret Grebowicz to talk about her new book, Mountains and Desire. But before I start, I want to remind you that SKYLIT Books is currently open, but we are following the current mask mandate. So please, please, please bring your masks when you come visit us. But yeah, come on by. Our website is also available right now for online ordering at www.skylitbooks.com. And yeah, you can still order books and come on by and pick them up. Margret Grebowicz is the author of Whale Song, The National Park to Come, and Why Internet Porn Matters, and co-author of Beyond the Cyborg, Adventures with Donna Haraway. She has been published in venues like The Atlantic, Slate, and the Philosophical Salon. She has also translated a number of poems from her native language, Polish. She has worked as a professional jazz vocalist in New York City and a philosophy professor at a number of universities. She is currently a professor at the University of Silesia in Poland. She currently lives in upstate New York. Hi, Margret. I'm sorry. I think I messed up that pronunciation?
No,
Silesia?
That was perfect. Perfect,
Oh,
Lance. Perfect.
thank you
Absolutely
so much.
spot on. Thank you.
Thank you. I was as you know before, I was so nervous.
And yet it was brilliant. So well
Thank you
done.
so much. Thank you so much, Margret. How are you doing today?
I'm hanging in there.
Hanging in there. That's the best we can ask for, right? You have a reading for us today. I'm so excited to hear.
I do. There are quite a few places in this book where I think one can sort of open and start reading kind of in the middle of things. And so I found one of those. This is in my chapter called Gestures of Climbing. It's actually chapter 6 of this book. And I'm going to start sort of right in the middle of the chapter.
Sounds good. Take it away.
Okay. These days, there's one kind of climbing on which everyone seems able to agree. It's not climbing for its own sake, much less for the sake of the Everest selfie. The perfect convergence of climbing and environmentalism is in the campaigns to carry trash down from Everest. The challenge of picking up the trash on Everest has received much media attention lately, as such campaigns continue, the latest causing some controversy. The UNESCO text points out each individual's commitment, such as leaving no lasting traces behind, as one of the basic tenets of alpinism. But the lasting traces that really threaten Everest are not in the form of litter. The litter narrative gives the mistaken impression that the more people climb every year, the more trash collects on the mountain. But most of the trash carried down today is from expeditions of previous generations, and just now being released by the melting ice. Although there are more of them, today's expeditions leave behind much less litter than those of the 1970s and the 1980s. As tour operator Lucas Furtenbach likes to half joke, climbers today are bringing down Reinhold Messner's garbage. Death Zone, which is a documentary from 2018, documents the first time in history that humans have gone to the death zone in order to clean it of the over 150 bodies and 100,000 pounds of garbage generated over time by over 4,000 climbers since 1953, which was the first summit. But the film quickly turns from the problem of litter to that of climate change. Frustratingly for filmmakers, the reality of waste management on Everest takes place on levels we don't see, like wastewater management at base camp and the ban on single-use plastics that Nepal instituted in 2019. This is where steadily growing numbers of climbers, in fact, translate into an ongoing waste crisis in the region, even as climbers responsibly carry out their own trash. The most important question leading the film is a climate question, not a litter one. And this is a quote from the film. "Look at this river. How many people will be drinking this water?" And in the end, narrator Patrick Stewart, Captain Jean-Luc Picard, warns that the whole world may become a death zone if humans do not change their ways and do something about climate change. And yet, religious and cultural issues work their way into the film as well, as the documentary manages to combine 3 levels of crisis into one: litter, climate change, and the loss of Tibetan culture, all coincide in this imaginary, just as they do around the climbing closings like in Uluru, for example, in Australia. The expedition leader, Namgyal Sherpa, says Everest is a goddess and offers this throughout the film as his explanation for the cleanup, all of which is ultimately explained as a Buddhist religious act of transforming negative into positive substance. Why then is the focus of this and so much other media on litter? The act of carrying down the litter accomplishes something that none of these other sustainability narratives do. It maintains the need for skilled, old school climbers, the kind with personal investments in the region and the ecosystem, the kind that UNESCO would like. It bridges the gap between a more traditional approach to climbing and Sherpa climbers and even Tibetan spiritual practices. Everest here becomes a place where all of these can be simultaneously prioritized by climbers, who can thus continue to climb in the name of sustainability. As long as we do not fall prey to ironmongering, which here becomes code for unsustainable climbing, whether from cultural or environmental perspectives, then we are all united against an enemy. But who are today's ironmongers? The ones exploiting the mountain for their own gain, the vain ones, the ones in it for the wrong reasons, the ones that the true sustainable climbing must reject or outrun. The answer to this is becoming harder and harder to determine. It's easy to point the finger at the wealthy financiers, except that they're the ones who can actually afford the most low footprint expedition companies. Now, surely Sherpas are not the ironmongers, unless we take seriously that they are making their living off commercial climbing. And so their interest in the mountains can hardly be considered pure. So then the purest climbers must be the free soloists, the ones who literally use no iron, quote unquote. But they are the ones who bring in film crews, right? Think of Free Solo. They bring in film crews, drones, and eventually celebrity. So in the era of climbing bans, it's clear that a certain vision of climbing aligns perfectly with the very same environmental goals that animate much public support of those bans. Once, the differences that mattered to the public were differences among climbing styles. This is what was once meant by different climbing cultures. Now, narratives, moral frameworks, and identities or positions within those frameworks matter more. This contrast promises to become even more heightened in the era of COVID-19, in which local and even global lockdowns, border crossings, and other constraints are always on the, border closings and other constraints are always on the horizon. The conversation about sustainable tourism is now changing into one about regenerative tourism, with calls to consider nature, human health, and community identities in the course of creating a new vitality of tourism, ostensibly leaving the travel destinations improved for future generations. We have come to the end of a fantasy of climbing as an overcoming of the human condition and a transcending of time and place. Instead, we are coming to see climbing as invariably inflected by the human, by geography, history, and geopolitics, a tectonic shift in self-understanding and worldview. The frameworks we have inherited for evaluating the moral standing of climbing, with debates built around universalizing questions like to climb or not to climb, these failed to speak to the complexity and acceleration that characterizes the global late capitalist situation. The latter is slowly but surely forcing a shift to particularizing questions with more provisional answers, answers that require justification and are subject to revision as the world continues to change. Who gets to climb? Where? Under what conditions? With what goals? And toward what consequences?
So what a great reading. That was fantastic. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
So there's so much I want to talk about with this. I mean, your book just, the way that you talk about climbing, it's like both there's the research part of it, but also like your history. There's like a lot of history with it too for you, it seems. Can you talk a little bit about your history of climbing?
Well, I'm not a climber. Like you, Lance, I'm not a climber.
Yeah.
But it's something I've always been fascinated by. And so I wanted to write a book as a kind of armchair climber, right? As a kind of spectator of this sport. Because I know that there are other people like me who sort of follow this and are fascinated and are interested and intrigued. And for whom it's a very unique activity that human beings do. So there are, I think, a lot of us out there, and climbing writing doesn't always really answer the questions that we have, right? So there's a genre called climbing writing. There's also a genre called philosophy of mountaineering, and this book doesn't really fall into either of those. It's something else. It's written by and for a kind of person that is just kind of watching this from afar and trying to understand what it all means in our present situation, right? In our present condition, however you want to name that condition, whether you want to call it late capitalism or the Anthropocene or the climate crisis or, a sort of the breakdown of the nation state. I mean, all of these things, right?
There needs to be like one word to like describe all of those situations. I feel like. Well,
there are words, but I don't think I can say them on the radio.
Listen, I give you the full go ahead to say whatever you want. They'll have to hear it. No, I feel like it's a very interesting thing to watch right now. If I had to pick from anything that I think is the most important for climbing right now is the climate change, I think. Because it's making a lot of places that people would go climb in mountains kind of uninhabitable. Can you talk about like the state of that, like the state of just the climate change affecting the people who do climb, or like what it will look like for them?
Yeah, I mean, it sort of depends on what you mean by people who climb, right? So we've got that sort of we have the professional sort of elite athletes who climb. Then we have people who are not professional climbers, but who are sort of what should we call paying clients, right? So they pay to have these expedition companies take them up in the high peaks, right? So in the Himalaya, and then we have the porters who are also climbing, the Sherpa porters who are also climbing. They are paid to assist with climbs, to carry equipment, to facilitate various things. They have multiple roles. They prepare the mountain for the climbers in various ways. They plants not the word, I'm losing the word. They put ropes in so that people can pull themselves up, and they make it sort of a safer situation for the paying clients. So you've got all these different sort of categories of people who climb. It's not just it's not just the climber. There's sort of almost no such thing anymore, right? You have to really be specific about the category you're talking about. And climate change will, or what we're calling glacial melting in the Himalayas, will affect all those groups in different ways, right? So certainly the Sherpa communities will be affected most dramatically, because when we are talking about glacial melting, we're talking about potentials for massive floods downstream of all of that, causing, natural disasters, massive displacements to communities, which will, it's predicted that those will cause, further economic crises in these places, right? In how that will then sort of affect the commercial climbing industry is complicated. We have to remember that Sherpa climbers are making, I don't even know what the number is anymore. Every time I see a documentary, it's a different number. They're making many, many times the amount of money that a sort of average Tibetan or Nepalese citizen can make, right? So we're talking about, an industry that's very lucrative from their perspective, right? So how it will be affected is really hard to say.
Yeah. But there just will be an effect. There will be
there will be an effect, and it will be very dramatic, because everything that happens there is very dramatic.
Right. I mean, it is a very dramatic
scene.
Field. Yeah. There's a lot of drama in this, and that's goes into the next thing I want to talk about, which is like, when you were like researching this book, did you see anything in the psychological, like the psychology of doing these climbs? Because it feels like there's a lot of, is it death junkies? Is that what they're called? Like the people who are chasing, like
adrenaline junkies.
Junkies. That's it. I mean, because to do that is like high adrenaline. Like it seems like an addictive quality to it too.
Well, that is certainly the reputation that climbers have. And one thing I'm trying to kind of be clear about in the book is that there's the world of climbing itself, which I don't have that much insight into because I'm not in it, right? What I have insight into and a sense of is how climbers are represented and how climbing is represented in the mainstream media. And absolutely in the mainstream media, we as an audience seem quite hungry for these stories of these like uber driven, addicted people, right? We're really in love with this kind of narrative of the climber that just has to go back, even though they've lost their best friend, right, in the mountains, or they've lost their leg, or something horrible has happened to them, but they just, it's and there's, I think, a lot going on there. There are a lot of sort of, I write about climbing as a projection space for various other fantasies about what it means to be human.
Right.
So, there's a kind of, kind of American late capitalist fantasy of overcoming all adversity and going back, and it's kind of individualistic and never give up, just do it. That kind of thinking. There are also, I think, very personal reasons why people continue to do this, that have to do with spiritual practices, that have to do with mindfulness and just having a practice at all. and disconnecting from a lot of the rest of the world, because you know there are reasons to disconnect.
Right. No, I mean,
as life becomes more and more unlivable,
right.
under pseudo normal conditions, right? When they're not, when they're less and less normal anyway.
Right.
So, so I think it's hard. You know, one message I want people to take away from my book is that there's no one answer to this. That there are all these sort of different levels of answer to this question, right? Because I went into watching this with that same question, like, what's up with these people? What's up with them? What are they doing? Why are they so obsessed with this, right? Are they actually this obsessed with this? You know, one thing we hear about very rarely is like climbers who do quit. I'm sure there are plenty of climbers who quit, but guess what? They're not the ones getting the book deals. Which is interesting, right? Which is interesting, because that I think might be an interesting book, like Why I Quit Climbing by somebody famous.
Right.
But you know, it tends to be sort of not really the thing that people are hungry for.
Right.
And that's what I want us to examine.
The people, the audience who are watching this.
That is what I want us to examine, is what is it that we want from these narratives exactly, right? What are we after?
Well, it seems like there's a lot of, it's like, it might be the adrenaline junkie. It's like our lives are, the people who are not climbing feel such normalcy in everyday life that this is how we get adrenaline, is from watching these people do these fantastic feats. Or the what's the word? The
vicarious.
Stereotyped. Yeah. Well, I was thinking more the stereotyped in the climber of the death junkie kind of stereotype for them.
Right.
We're trying to get that for ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, you know, one thing to really ask ourselves, one of the things I'm writing about in this book is the movie Free Solo, and why it had such enormous success, right? It won the Oscar for Best Documentary Feature. And, you know, in terms of filmmaking, with all due respect, it's really hard for me to imagine that it's a better documentary in terms of filmmaking than whatever else was, you know, nominated that year.
Yeah.
I'm sure there was some exquisite documentary filmmaking on the table. But that Free Solo one really has less to do with the level of documentary, and more with this exquisite, completely unique feat, right? For the first time in history, for the first time in human history, something like this has been done, right?
Right. Alex
Honnold, Free Solos, El Cap, and which is, as he says, the center of the rock climbing universe, right? For all rock. So he does this thing that no one would have thought was humanly possible, and it's captured on camera,
right?
And so there's a strange experience as we're watching it, because we know that he survived, right? I mean, we know this because we've seen the preview.
Right.
So we know he makes it. So it's not like a knuckle biter. And yet, right? And yet, as we're watching it, there are all kinds of sort of, I think, engagements with the possibility of death.
Right.
First of all, we're reminded all the time about all the people who have died rock climbing, all of his friends who are also free solo climbers who have died, who will continue to die, right? Because this is not, you know, you're not going to sort of beat this sport, right? It will always be as dangerous as it is. It's just a matter of who gets away with it and who doesn't.
Well, it seems like it's also a matter of time, like an eventuality of like, especially I feel like the Giraffe Free Solo, as I remember it, I don't think I couldn't watch it because I was like, no, this is not a film for me to watch, because no. But the thing that I remember was people were like, oh, it's not that he dies in it, it's that he's going to die doing this one day. This is going to be, and he's choosing it though. He's choosing it knowing that it's an eventuality, and he's making this, I feel like it's the investigation of making that choice, right? To like, go and maybe die.
I mean, yes and no. You know, if you listen to interviews with climbers, you know,
Mhm.
none of them are interested in dying.
Right.
You know,
right.
none of them are, for them it's just it's they're good at this thing that they
Mhm.
do, and
Right.
it's risky, but you know, so is driving your car.
Right. When in that, I mean like more of the audience being like he's going to, like there's that audience thinking that, oh, he's doing this and he knows he's eventually going to die doing it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that that's an audience projection
Mhm.
then, right?
Truth.
I don't think, I mean, you know what I mean? It's really,
Yeah.
once you're dealing with figures like Honnold in that movie, you're dealing with a
Mhm.
kind of sort of, I don't know how to say it. You're dealing with like a character at the
Mhm.
edge of the human imagination,
Right.
right? I mean, I know it's a documentary and I know that Alex Honnold is a real person,
Yeah.
but it doesn't seem to matter.
No.
It doesn't matter to us because we as the audience are sort of, we're confronted here by a
Mhm.
kind of, you know, and the ultimate like faceless human being standing before the abyss.
Right.
That is really, we're talking about like the pure human, whoever that is, like this universal human figure confronted by the abyss. And this is really how that film positions the audience, right, vis-a-vis
Right.
Honnold, rather than Honnold as just a dude,
Mhm.
and you know, and this feat as just one event in
Mhm.
you know, the large scale history of climbing, which is absolutely how he sees himself. He sees
Right.
himself as just a dude, and this is just a thing. There will be
Mhm.
other things, and other people are good at other things. So,
Right.
but you know, the reason it has such impact is because it puts us in relation with this kind of universalizable experience of the abyss, right?
Right.
um and so yeah, so I think it's a very unique film to be watching at this time, for all
Yeah.
of us to be watching at this time.
Well, it feels like also that thrill people get, the audience, from the audience perspective, that thrill they get from like watching a war movie where they're like seeing someone also kind of staring, like, you know, those war movies where it's like people who are always go back, they always have to go back and they always have
Right.
to like keep going. That same kind of like people being like, oh, I want to watch this person staring into that abyss, staring into that like face of immediate danger and possible death. And like there's the movies, you know, like the biopics where like, you know, who makes it out at the end because it's a true story, but they still go to watch it because they want to see them get as close to this danger as possible.
Right.
And it seems very similar to that, and it seems like there might be some overlap in audience, overlap in like,
Probably.
yeah. And it seems like, right, the thing that's getting popular with it too is this kind of Instagram influencer kind of engagement with trying to do that too. And you talk about that in your book too, right?
Right.
And
Yeah, because you know, to me the kind of that hunger that you're describing
mhm,
for those limit experiences, right,
mhm,
for the abyss, that hunger is somehow related to the fact that we're getting less and less of that in our actual lives,
mhm.
right? So
Right.
we look for it vicariously because we are not, there's some kind of um disconnection or
Mhm,
distance from our own sort of experiences of authenticity and risk,
mhm. And
right?
that,
So we're after it somewhere, we want
mhm,
it from something else, I think.
mhm. And I think, yeah, it's like, yeah, and I mean, because I've seen this too, and I think it's a TikTok trend too right now, which I don't understand that world where like people are going out there, and I think that during the pandemic when people were like, oh, there was like this push to go outside, to like, we can't stay inside, but we can't also be around others. So the only thing we could do is be solitary out in nature. So there was this like, and maybe it was also from the trend of like what Free Solo brought out, people doing these extreme things to post online, which feels, it feels both similar to what Free Solo was as a documentary, but also different because there's like, these are just people looking for some internet clout to like be like, oh, I can do that same thing too. How does that like transfer to like audience engagement?
You tell me. I mean, that's exactly my question, right? That's exactly my question. What, one of the things that I'm interested in the book is how publicity affects climbing, but also, the forms of publicity keep changing. The modes, the genres, the media of publicity keep changing. So, what about that Everest selfie, right?
Yeah.
What about Everest as a presence on Instagram, or Everest as a presence on TikTok, or Yosemite as a presence on TikTok? These are fascinating questions to me, because I think they are actually very different things than, major motion pictures.
Right.
And they have much sort of, in a way, they have much greater reach, much greater power, right, than major motion pictures.
And it also feels like, are they becoming their own kind of category of climbers themselves, like an influencer climber?
I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think that's a fantastic way of putting it. Yeah, I didn't think of it that way, but I think now that would be the volume 2, Lance. Volume 2.
Influencer climber.
It's interesting. Let me just add one more thing. You asked that question at the beginning about climate change and how it's going to affect climbers, and one of the at the moment, probably the most successful like pro climber is this guy named Nirmal Purja. They call him Nims Purja, and he has he beat the set by Jerzy Kukuczka, who is one of my countrymen, a Pole. Who set the record for climbing, summiting all of the highest peaks in the world. The time record, right? So Nims Purja came in and beat that record. I think Kukuczka held the record for something like, I don't know, I'd have to look, but it was a long time. It was many decades, right? Wow. So no time record, and suddenly here comes Nims Purja and basically does it in, I think Kukuczka's record was something like doing it over 8 years or something, and Nims Purja does it in something like 6 months.
Oh my God! Wow.
That's the difference that we're talking about. And when Purja reported about this, when he sort of said, "Okay, I've done it," he also reported about climate change. He said, "Look, the reason that it was possible to do something like this is because conditions have changed so dramatically,
right?
And that's because of Himalayan melting." He is also the one who took the photo of he took a photo that went viral of people sort of waiting in line to start their way up to the Everest summit, and that photo went viral. So someone like Purja is a great example of, he's a professional elite climber, but he very much has a very sort of strong presence on Instagram.
Right.
Also, so he's not an influencer, even though no one would dare say about him he's just an influencer. I mean, he's one of the top climbers in the world.
Right.
So these are all going to be like weirdly overlapping categories.
Well, it seems like he's earned that kind of, higher level of like the influencer where he's earned it. It's like a politician on no, I can't put through that. It's like a scientist on making a Instagram account
Or
for
TikTok.
or TikTok. A scientist making a TikTok versus like someone who's into science making a TikTok about it, because there's a sort of higher level of understanding of the thing,
Right.
where maybe it should be like the amateur climber on it, TikTok or Instagram doing it, where like a part of it I feel like is also that same free solo danger, where you're like, this is a person who definitely doesn't know how to climb, or is not like, or is, because they're doing it only for clout and not because they're professional at it, there is a more immediate sense of danger there. But that's what makes it interesting for people to watch now.
Right.
Yeah, maybe it would have changed. Maybe if this was like a thing before Free Solo, I mean, it probably was, but like if Free Solo didn't push it as far as it did, it would have been like a different, you know, it would be different. The landscape of it would be different. But
yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
And the landscape of it keeps changing. The New York Times just published an article a few days ago where about a man who's sort of the record keeper for the highest peaks, for the summits of the highest peaks, and he's basically claiming that basically no one has actually summited like successfully. That there are very few actual successful summits because people are confused about where the summit actually is, or they don't misreport in the sense of lying, but that there are all these reports that are not quite getting it right. So that all of these summits, that so many of these summits that over the decades have been clocked are actually not the case.
Wow. I mean,
so this keeps changing, right? And what I really love about that article in the New York Times is they say, oh, of course, this is going to completely change the history of climbing. Or will it? Right. And I liked that. I like that we're suddenly sort of getting enough we as an audience are getting enough distance from this to understand that it really is a media question, right? That it's really a question about media and publicity and news and reporting and record keeping, right? And measurement and surveying and all of these things. That's really what's going on here, and that we have to take into account the complexity of this situation. And I think, the average reader, the average viewer is coming to see that.
Right.
And that's really great. That's really great.
I mean, from like studying the audience, how the audience sees climbing, it seems like that's a positive thing that you're really seeing from there. Was there any other positive things that you saw from this like research, like anything that you were like, oh wow, this is something that people are actually like, that's enhancing the human experience in some way, which feels like such a broad thing to say, but yeah, like something that like made you feel, oh wow, this is actually furthering the human condition human conditioning, wow. But furthering the human condition.
I mean, in general, I would say, this is a bit of a strange answer, but I think the fact that my book was published at all is a sign that people are open to having the conversation about climbing with someone other than a climber. I think that's really important. I mean, that people are understanding like I said, that people are understanding this as a phenomenon of the media. And they want to talk about it on that level. They want to read about it and think about it on that level. They don't just want to read climbing stories.
Right.
That tells me something. So the fact that the book has, that it was published, that it's actually had considerable success, is to me a sign that audiences, that there is an audience for this conversation, right? That audiences really want to reflect on what's being fed to them, if you will, right? And what they're projecting on various kinds of, spheres of human activity. They want to understand themselves. And that, to me, is much more interesting than any kind of traditional philosophy of mountaineering.
Yeah.
I hope you're hearing the big scare quotes around that. It's really, philosophy of mountaineering is really, I think, sort of a bit of a travesty. I mean, I don't think it's very outdated, and it tends to make sort of universal claims about the human condition, which, as I read to you in that piece, I don't think that's appropriate anymore. And I don't think it's appropriate to project onto climbing anymore. And that what we can get out of climbing instead is a massive amount of insight into all of us can get a massive amount of insight into our situations, plural, right? But not by sort of imagining a universal human condition of man on mountain sticking his flag in the mountain, right? But instead, this very complex, fascinating phenomenon of people risking themselves in these ways, us non-climbers asking, why do you do that? Them having various answers to that, us projecting us projecting myriad things onto these answers, and then coming to see these as projections and examining our own projections, right? Examining ourselves as desiring creatures in relationship to this practice. Wow. That's what I think is the big gift that climbing can give us today.
And that, I mean, wow, that what an answer. That is, I feel like that should be like, that should be somehow said or something like that. Like a recording of that should play before someone opens the book, because that's what grabbed me there. It's like, yeah, it seems very like hopeful. There was hope in that, like, and that's kind of, I feel missing in a lot of talks about like anything to do with nature right now. It's like very like negative and very, the future of it is uncertain and probably not going to be sustainable. But what you said kind of just felt so contradictory to that I like, wow, it made me want to think, maybe I will climb. I won't ever. To the listeners, I won't ever. No, there's nothing that'll make me climb.
Come on, Lance.
The one climbing story I have is so hilarious. I don't know if I can say it. I'll say it. I went climbing I went like hiking, kind of, and it was like up on the Red Rocks in Colorado. I went up there and I don't know. I'm not a hiker. I don't do it. Will never do it again. But I was like, all right, one thing I have to do is bring water. I know that as a fact. I bring a can of LaCroix up there, and a can of LaCroix. I want you to know, guys, Margaret is covering her face. She is in distress. No, it was hilarious because people were visibly pointing and laughing at me as they were coming down, because they see me with this little can. And I'm just like, this is all the water I need. I don't know how to do any of it, guys. I don't know. When I was climbing up, my mom called me and I was like, yeah, I can't talk right now. I'm hiking. She starts laughing. She starts just laughing to the point where a friend that I was with heard it over the phone and was like, what is that? I'm like, my mom laughing at me about this, and like put our entire family on the phone for it. So no, that will never be a possibility. But that statement you just said is the closest I have to maybe considering it.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, no, I actually really do want people to get outside more, right?
Yeah. No,
but not in just like, not in, but I also want them to allow themselves to have a lot of contradictory feelings about it, and a lot of, internally inconsistent thoughts about it, because I think it is an inconsistent sphere of experiences and emotions. I mean, and I say this as someone who lives in the country and is outside a lot and is a wilderness enthusiast. I think people absolutely need to go out there, but the more that they go out there and get out there, the more they should sort of allow themselves to have a lot of different modes with it. in it.
And I think
Yeah.
that'll help, understand and appreciate, what we have, and maybe keep it if I feel like enough people like that have that mentality, there will be more of a push to keep it sustainable and to kind of try to reverse, some of the problems that are happening right now in nature. But like, it's people having to make that choice to go out and understand it, which hopefully, instead of other people deciding to spend billions to go up into space for no reason. But that's a hypothetical. That's not something that really happened. So sadly we have to wrap up, but before we go, I have one last thing to ask you. For you, is there anything that would get you to go out there and climb a mountain in this way? Is there anything that, like, maybe you discovered in this book, they were like, maybe this would be the thing that would get me to go out there and try this dangerous and like very arduous thing?
That's a good question. That's a hard question.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm like everyone else, in this respect. Like, when you see what climbers do,
Mm-hmm.
when you see how dedicated they are to the sport, to their training,
Mm-hmm.
to the environments that
Mm-hmm.
that they work in, that they climb in,
Mm-hmm.
it's really moving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So all of this research made me think, like, wow, that's really extraordinary what these people are doing, and I would really like to do something like that. I'd like to see what's happening. I'd like to go and see. But in that respect, I think I'm exactly like everyone else, right?
Yeah, no, that's
it's extraordinarily impressive. It is extraordinarily impressive, and no amount of critique really takes that away. We can make fun of Everest selfies all day long, and I do. I'm the queen of making fun of Everest selfies, but no amount of that really, really sort of takes away from what it means to have to have a practice that's dedicated to something like that.
And like, I mean, wow. And that's so true. Like, yeah, it's like one of those things where it's like, there will obviously be critiques on it. There obviously be a person who says, oh, this is, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? Commercialization of this amazing thing, or you are taking this beautiful space and kind of doing a crude thing to it by putting it online and making it blah, blah. But it's meaningless. You can't take you're saying that, but you're not taking away that experience from that person. They did that. They made this feat. They deserve in some ways to like take that Everest selfie. They deserve it. And we just I will also make fun of them because it is a ridiculous thing to like. It's that ridiculous thing of like, you climbed it. Why do you want to take a selfie? But like, hey, they climbed it. They should deserve to take that selfie. And no, what a great way to end it. Yeah, like I feel kind of, again, moved to maybe one day think about maybe one day doing it.
I'm holding you to this, Lance. I want to know about it when it happens.
That I maybe thought about it, and I will let you know when I maybe think about it. No, this has been such a great talk. No, I had a fun time. This has been, I'm gonna go outside today. I'm gonna go outside. I'm gonna do it.
Well, Lance, you live in LA. There are all those beautiful mountains all around.
That's true. And
mountains are mountains. I mean, no way around it. They are ancient, and they are they're pretty special places. So
when I lived in Colorado, I house sit in one of the 14ers. 14ers, is that what they call it? The big ones, yeah. And
14,000 feet.
14,000 feet, yeah. And I went up there, and it was right on the Continental Divide that I was at this house, and it was so beautiful. And that's I think that moment where I was like, wow, this is this is real. This is a real thing. This is not something I just, because this was the first time I lived in a state with mountains like that. And I was like, this is an actual, this is an actual thing that I'm seeing. This is not something on TV. This is not a picture I'm seeing. I'm up here looking at these high peaks. And it just like, I don't know, that was something that like changed my perspective on something. Even a little bit it did, but like it did. I felt different afterwards. I felt like I had a higher appreciation for the world I'm living in. So
yeah. And the more we learn about the history of the land, right? The more we learn about the history of public land and the indigenous people that lived in these places, whether they went up into the mountains or not, or what they would have used mountaintops for. We keep learning about things about the land that change our experience when we do that, right? When we go and then we're like, wow, okay, well, this is what happened up here.
Yeah,
this is who used this. This is the people for whom this was ancestral land. We just keep, I just think it's an endless kind of fountain.
Yeah.
It's an endless source, right? Of a way of connecting to life and the earth and, even the local place where you are. So yes.
No, you're right.
I'll see you in the mountains, Lance.
We'll meet there. That's where we'll meet. And to the listeners, like, wherever you are, and I feel like there's nowhere to escape this. Like wherever you are, there's a way to just see nature and to really go out and respect the world there. So my challenge to the listeners, this is the SKYLIT Books, SKYLIT Challenge, hashtag SKYLIT Challenge. Go outside and just like, I don't know, appreciate nature in some way today. Like go look at a tree and see why. Just ask why to this tree. No, just like go see something that like no one else in the world other than where you are can see this and appreciate that. And I feel like in doing so, you will really embody the spirit of your book, Margret. So thank you for all the people today who are appreciating the world outside a little bit more. Thank you to you from them. That made sense. That made sense. Thank you is what I want to say. And yeah, we have to wrap up, but to all the listeners out there, you can buy Margret's book, Mountains and Desire, right now. Currently, right now, it's at SKYLIT Books. It's right in our front podcast display. You will see it out there. If you don't, go ask a bookseller who's there to go find it for you. But yeah, go buy this book and go really.
It's my huge pleasure. Sorry.
This is exciting. Go buy this book. Go appreciate like what these people are doing. Even if you think you won't, check it out. Why not, right? Why not? You might. And no, this is an exciting piece of work. I'm very glad to know about it in this way. Before we go, Margret, I want to know if you have anything you would like to say to the independent bookstore community.
Very much. I wanted to thank you, Lance, and thank SKYLIT Books, and
thank you.
And to thank the independent bookstore community because you guys bought my book, and that's not nothing. Actually, I've received mail from people I never would have met, and when I ask, hey, how did you hear of my book? How did you come upon my book? And they say, oh, it was at my local bookstore.
Yeah.
And that to me is really just the greatest gift, is that I am now in conversation with new friends. I am thinking with other writers who found me because independent bookstores exist and because they take a chance on a little independent book like this. I'm just floored by this whole world and greatly indebted to this world of indie bookstores and that it continues. So many thanks to the bookstores, many thanks to the readers who are supporting them.
And it's books like yours that make it like worth it too. Like if it's like a book that like a person, we can help a person who wouldn't even know it because like that's a terrible, you know what I mean? Like book that like people
Yeah.
wouldn't normally grab, and we could tell
Yeah.
them, yeah, this is why the Skylight Books podcast does what we do, is for people to find out about books they would never have thought of before. So thank you for being one of those books that we get to talk about. And I will definitely now be like, guess what, guys? Go outside and climb a mountain, and while you're doing that, read this book.
It's my honor, Lance. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And thank you to all the listeners out there for coming back or listening for the first time. And I hope you have a beautiful day outside appreciating nature. Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to the Skylight Books podcast series. Please don't forget to visit our website at skylightbooks.com and make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for more author talks and bookseller conversations. You can find us on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see you back in our store soon.